This segment is brought to you in part by the Canadian Historical Arms Society, owners of the Genesee Range, the premier recreational sport and training facility in Western Canada. See us online at historical-arms.com.
The Quiet Professional, a podcast about law enforcement, security, justice, and politics. We are digging deeper on the issues and going where the information takes us with access to experts and authorities. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Quiet Professional. Today we're going to be talking everything municipal politics. For that, I have Sarah Hamilton here. Sarah is a councilor for the City of Edmonton in her second term. Originally born and raised here, Sarah graduated from the University of Alberta and later received a Master of Arts degree at the School of Art Institute of Chicago. Prior to serving in her current capacity, Sarah was an adjunct professor of media and communications, a freelance journalist, and an owner and operator of a communications and public relations firm. Also, she held various public service-oriented roles in the provincial and municipal governments. So welcome, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
I was just reading that one section there. So owner-operator of communications, public relations. I was like, oh, well, we're going to have a bunch in common here doing this podcast. But one thing I do want to kind of just start with before we get into talking about you is I kind of want to start at the end if we can. And you've only got a couple weeks left officially on city council, I guess. What's the actual end date, and how's knowing the end is coming? How are you handling that?
Well, you're right. I'm retiring from my role as a city councilor in a few weeks. I announced it back in March. Our last meeting is September 19th-ish. So that's coming up here next week. But as an elected official, you serve until the new council is sworn in. So the next election is October 20th. And if you reside in Edmonton or Alberta, you should get out and vote in your local municipal election. And then the new council will be sworn in about 10 days after that. So on or around the 30th of October. So as an elected official, I can be called on up until the new council is sworn in, depending on the criticality of something happening. I think something we're used to in a lot of governments is sort of once an election is rolling, you shouldn't make any critical decisions. And so I'm not anticipating a lot of it to be super busy between now and the 20th of October, but it's been in unconventional terms. So I'm not holding my breath that we won't have much to do. I probably will have moments of where I get that twinge of sadness because I've spent 8 years of my life working for the constituents of Ward Sipi-Winiwak, formerly Ward 5, and I am still grateful each and every day that I have got to do this job. But I think I've also been really honest with myself that it's time not just for me to move on, but I'm one of those people who thinks that you do need new leadership once in a while, even if you believe that the person that's elected is doing a bang up job, and I definitely get feedback from across the range. Yeah. As I think we all do. Maybe that's something we have in common. But I also think it's like really healthy for constituents to have different representation for a time. So I'm looking forward to new challenges and seeing what the next city councilor for the area and the next city council take on as their priorities. That's an opportunity for Edmonton as well.
Well, I guess if they're getting sworn in the day before Halloween, can say it can be a real trick or a treat. We'll see who gets in there and what exactly they start doing. But yeah, I get, well, and for you when you get to the end of it, there's no overtime. So you're hoping there's no big decisions to make because like, this is my cutoff day. I'm not working past that.
Well, and I mean, because we're still live, like we still get constituent emails. We still have people reaching out about stuff. I think we're still, me and my office staff are going to be working with the folks who are struggling with some of the city processes and clarifying that for them. But we and helping residents, right? That's why I wanted to run in the first place. And people up until the last minute need help navigating city services. So we'll still be there to do that. But I'm not anticipating any major decisions will get pushed through.
Yeah. Well, I guess on that, what got you into municipal politics? Why at this level? And did you have anybody to kind of push you in this direction or follow in their footsteps?
Mhm. I did actually. I'm not, I've said it a few times, I'm not somebody who saw myself as someone who's going to run for political office. You know, I think health, to a certain degree, I have a healthy discomfort with too much attention or too much spotlight. But just over 10 years ago, I got the incredible opportunity to work for the provincial government in the minister's office under Stephen Mandela's health minister. And I started to see for the first time how what impact you could have in a political office, maybe that wasn't elected, just even as a staffer. And I was totally hooked. I also was involved in campaigns, and I saw how you could. I learned essentially how to run a good campaign, but I still didn't really see myself as being somebody who stepped up to put their name on the ballot. That wasn't something I was interested in, and for a long time, I didn't think that I myself would have a lot to offer. But in the intervening years, that changed. We saw a lot of women pull back from putting their name on the ballot because they felt they were discouraged by what they were seeing in politics. And I think we saw a lot of, and I think this has only grown in the intervening years, a lot of rhetoric that pushed and pushes moderates out of the space of leadership. And for me, there was like a critical point in late 2016. And I talked about it in Edify last year, where I just realized that it doesn't get better unless somebody, like, you don't get young people elected, you don't get women elected, you don't get moderates elected unless somebody steps up to do that work.
Yeah.
And I had that realization, and it had come at a time where my former boss and like a good friend of mine, Steve Mandel, had said, you should really think about running. And I had never thought up to that point about municipal politics. I always thought about provincial or federal politics, which is highly partisan. And the highly partisan nature of it was a bit of a turnoff for me. But I hadn't considered municipal politics, and it felt like something just hit me. And I was like, I kind of feel like I need to, I felt struck, and so I felt like I needed to consider that. And then another friend of mine who had run before and was younger than me said, you should really think about running. And I thought, well, if two people think that I should consider running, usually it takes women upwards of 4 times to be asked to even start to think about it. And I thought, well, I'm halfway there. So I got to save some of that energy on other people's part. I'm going to think about it. I give myself until the beginning of February, when my birthday is, to decide whether or not it was something I wanted to pursue. And I went and I talked to a lot of people in the space. I talked to a lot of political folks. I talked to people who I really liked and who liked me. Then I also talked to people who didn't necessarily have a lot of time for me, but I asked their opinion anyway. And I got to that point in 2017 where I was like, listen, like, you've been learning a lot, and now it's time to test it out. And if you don't get it, then there will be other ways to serve your community. But I started to ramp up a campaign. And that was at a time, and I mention this because at that time you only had one woman on city council. I think the average age of city council was, I'd say, much older than it is now. And there was a considerable push to have a council that was more representative of the population that you're governing.
Yeah.
So I was 32 years old. I got elected. We went from one woman on city council to 2 women on city council. But we also had 4 city councilors and the mayor at the time who were under the age of 40. And when Edmonton is the youngest or the second youngest city in Canada. I think we go back and forth. I also think that's important to consider, to have that balance, because you start to realize that your experiences reflect what a lot of Edmontonians are experiencing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I want to go back to when you talk about pushing moderates out. So I think the part about pushing females out is interesting, but also the moderates, just given a lot of the rhetoric we see going on today. Obviously, was it 2 days ago now, Charlie Kirk was shot and killed in the US. And granted, he's not a politician, but he had a lot of political influence. But we see attempts on presidents. When we have Trudeau walking around, he's got people hucking gravel at him. So it's both sides of the border, and a lot of people are getting approached or accosted, and it's not good. Do you think, like, where we are right now, is it kind of on a pendulum swing? Are we seeing things coming back in the municipal politics side? And I'll come back and ask that again, but I'll give a little explanation, because in the policing world, it can be crazy. And we get all kinds of people coming up to us and saying all kinds of things. But, we see a very slow shift of some of the way out there rhetoric, the way out there ideas. I think there's a little less of it right now, but I'm wondering, on the political side, what's your experience? Obviously you have a lot of people that send you emails or call the office or want things from you and counsel. So where does it kind of stand? Are we moving back to being moderate, or are we still playing at the extremes?
That's a huge question, but I really like that you brought it up, because
you've got half an hour to answer it. So,
okay. So I think that we are really close to one side of a pendulum swing. And I'm going to say something that's going to despair a lot of people, but I want to come out on a note of hope here. Like, we forget that the license we have to govern, just as the license officers have to police, is hard won. And it has been built up over decades and decades of change and reform and trust building and trust losing. But it is underpinned by a notion that we all agree on a foundational value. One of those foundational values is liberal democracies. And I bring that up because, and we could go really wide here, I'm going to try not to go too wide on it. You bring up the things that have happened this week, the murder of Charlie Kirk, as an example. And that's a really good example where you have somebody who had opinions that a lot of people disagree with, including myself. And some of the rhetoric, actually, I'll say a lot of the rhetoric has been conditional. And what I mean by that, similar to the point you just made, is people are like, I have seen posts online from normal people who are like not sympathetic or do not acknowledge that this was murder, it was a crime, and that this person didn't deserve it. And you've seen that too. And that notion of something being wrong only if you agree with the circumstances under which it happened, which we also saw earlier this year with the murder of the HMO CEO in the US. We're losing that sense that something can be fundamentally right or fundamentally wrong.
You're either all in or you're all out, right? Like, you either agree with me 100% or you're the enemy, and you're called a racist, a Nazi, a fascist, like all these different names. And it's like, whoa, we don't have to agree on a lot of things, but we go back to that foundation where we say, okay, we know we're trying to work toward this certain end goal, or we want to get to this certain point. We kind of have the start and we know where we want to get to, but people can't even agree on that anymore. Like, what do we all agree on? What do we believe? It's very difficult starting point.
And some of that has come, this didn't all happen overnight. I think that I would wager even you and I probably don't watch the same media. We don't read the same news. I can assume you read some of the same news. or I hope you do. I hope everyone reads their local newspaper. But 40 or 50 years ago, even 20 years ago, people were getting roughly the same information from roughly the same sources. Now we have an environment where the media landscape is hyper fragmented. I would wager a lot of your listeners or don't have, say, cable news or cable television, don't necessarily watch those traditional or legacy media channels, which is why there's like probably part of your success is people are looking for something that is more tailored to or representative of their experiences. But we've lost that grounding point.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure that grounding, whether it's a geographical grounding point or an information grounding point or a values grounding point, and I'm not sure how we get it back. But the hopeful note on that is that I think people are really also desperate for a leader who can call on us all to be the best version of ourselves and who can speak to and soothe our fears rather than inflaming them, and who can give us hope that isn't empty. And and I think that comes from a moderate place, because so that's my like hopeful note, is that if you're one of those people who feels sort of stuck in the middle and like there's two factions that are pulling at your worst inclinations, I say hold your ground on that,
Yeah.
because you need those sentinels, I guess, of liberal democracy to hold fast, and to push back on the institution, the eroding of those institutions, because it does happen slowly, but both justice and government are institutions that people need to feel are fundamentally fair.
I think you're absolutely right on those points. I think a lot of the people out there are in the middle. They're just not vocal about it. And they do want somebody that can kind of guide them and lead them in this way. The problem is a lot of the people with the biggest platforms or the biggest microphone or that are given the opportunity to speak to the most people have for some reason chosen to go to the extremes. So a lot of people think that is the norm. I can guarantee you it's not the norm. I deal with dozens, if not hundreds of people a day. A lot of people just want to go about their business and be left alone
Yes.
and, just kind of dip into the politics of it or whatever it is when they need to. But we're at a point where it's, like you were saying, it's so highly fragmented that it's politics is in everything. And the vitriol and the hate and all that stuff that gets spewed out there, it's tiring to be involved in that all the time. And as somebody who I thrive in chaos, I like being in the chaos of things, partially why I do the job I do. Even I get tired of it, right? Like your brain gets tired, you physically get tired. So I couldn't imagine for the average person who does their job 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, who's not looking for this, what it would be like to be them. And one thing that I don't think a lot of people are very aware, and this would be more on the law enforcement intelligence conversations along the lines of those that I have, but a lot of the stuff online outside of verified accounts, and I just did a post on social media about this today, outside of like the verified politicians, celebrities, special interest groups, and protesters, those are a lot of bots that are fanning the flames, and people go on there and it's like, underscore 123, whatever their name is. And you're like, people are responding to this, oh, look at this person. They want these people dead. And how can they say this? It's like, that's AI. That's just a computer. But people are freaking out about it. And, like you're saying, when you go to the traditional media, a certain age group might be watching that still. Everybody else is online and that's all they're eating up. So it's very difficult to pull people back out of that world. They're kind of getting sucked into this vortex.
And I mean, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but we're also not asking who's running those bots.
Yeah.
what's their interest in doing so. And I was in a briefing last year where they were talking about, I think that intersection of in whose interest is it to have this kind of chaos, especially in municipal governments. I think you see it in a lot more in the US, but I think municipal elected officials across the Western world have to get really wise to how these tools are being used to manipulate democracies and voters.
Well, 100%. It's,
Mhm.
yeah, and I won't go too far into it, but and I can save it for another day with another discussion. But there's people with interest even from outside this country.
Mhm.
They have a vested interest in seeing the chaos and the collapse of things, right from everything from industry to government to all the stuff that's going on here. So that's something that I've been pushing, that we need the politicians to be more informed on, because
Mhm.
I don't think they get very much, at least not from the police side. I don't know if intel agencies talk to you guys, but from our side, I don't think you get a lot.
I think we've been extraordinarily fortunate in this country, up and up until very recently, that this we could be naive to this. And I think this past term has taught me that we cannot be naive to this anymore. Whether uh, about sort of domestic threats or how we might be used by foreign actors as part of a larger effort to create mis and disinformation.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and you could probably do a whole thing about that, but that was my feedback to our own folks, is that we had to get more serious about security, like cybersecurity and these types of conversations, and not just personal security, which has also become a concern.
Yeah.
Throughout this term. Yeah.
We'll go back to talking a bit about you
Sure.
and just your style. I wanted to ask about this. So, do you see yourself as having a specific style of politics, or the way you kind of carry yourself when you're in there? And I think I asked this of at least one other counselor that I had on, because I've had Knack, Cartmel, and Jans on. And I know I've asked it in there somewhere, but it's always an interesting question.
I think I do have a specific style, and part of that came early in my first term. Like, it's a leadership style. Part of it came out of, you see how different people, especially coming from a previous political background, and in the middle of all of that backstory I told you, I also worked on the 2015 Liberal campaign. So I saw a lot of candidates. I saw a lot of I've seen a lot of before I ever took office myself. I saw a lot of leaders in action, and I saw a lot of people who wanted to be leaders. And one of the things I struggled with, especially because I was the youngest person on council, as a woman, and I'm still a woman, but I was thinking about, how do I sort of assert authority and leadership, but in a way that feels authentic to myself. And something I'll say a lot is that you only get to flip the table once. Through a lot of my political career, you hear these stories of like someone throwing binders or pounding their fist on the table, and they scare the bejesus out of who's ever in that meeting with them. And so I say you only get to flip the table once, because you only get to scare the bejesus out of people once. And then either they dread talking to you or going into meetings with you, or they learn to not take you seriously. And those are two negative outcomes, and those are things within your control. So I just thought through, like, how do I have the tough conversations without being tough on people? And I settled in this place where it was like, I called it the disappointed mom strategy, or the disappointed mom persona, which is like you can have a tough conversation with your disappointed mom, but like at the end of that, you're still, like, you're coming out of it working together. They believe in you. And for some people, I think that manifests differently. I wasn't a mom at the time, so I was just channeling sort of something abstract to me, but that has become kind of my reference point, which is like, Like, you can be tough on an issue and not be tough on the people. Can make people feel supported and make them feel valued, but also hold them accountable and have a standard for them. And I hope that that has worked for me. At the very least, I think as leaders, you have to develop a style. Like, what I didn't want to do was develop a style of leadership that made it so I couldn't sleep at night. That kind of, like, you got to live with yourself. I didn't want to have regrets about how I treated people or how I handled things. And there's certainly things I wish I'd been tougher on, but I didn't want to unintentionally hurt people.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to develop a style that was harmful. So that's sort of where I landed.
You know, it makes me think of like some of when you talk about like power in a position, and some people rule with authority, and it's like, oh, I'm this position and you're going to do what I said. Otherwise I'm just going to punish you or whatever. But when you look at that disappointment side of it, and it's like, yeah, what, I've referred to it on here as like the disappointed dad. So even when I'm sergeant for one of the squads in downtown division in patrol, and I went in there and told everybody, like, I'm your peer, right? I just did this test in an interview, and the next day I'm a sergeant. Like, I know the job, and I still want to support you. I want to be able to do these other things in my career. That's why I did this position. But it doesn't mean I'm, what I say goes and you're going to do what I say. It's more about, hey, I'm here to support you and get all these things done. But because I'm in this spot, I have access to certain things, or I can take things a certain direction. So I'm doing all this over here, but I'm still with you. So exactly like you're saying.
Yeah. And I think that's not going to work for everyone. And I also recognize, like, not everyone has a great relationship with their parents, right? So maybe it's a disappointed coach or disappointed librarian or something like that. But that's also not a strategy that works for everyone. I think whenever you're entering a position of leadership or a position of power, you do, though, need to reflect on how you want to enter a room and how you want to leave it. And I actually took like a course, the Roy Leadership Group course, on mentorship and leading late in my first term. And I was really arrogant at the time. And I thought, we're kind of like coming out of the pandemic. And I was like, who's going to teach me about this? And I was blown away. So one, I got humbled. It was a great course. And it gave me permission as a leader to do things. Like, a big component of what they talked about was putting down boundaries around your time.
Okay. Yeah.
Which, as a gift to other people, like, if you say you're going to have coffee for an hour with someone, you're like, okay, I got to be out of here in an hour. And then you don't have to constantly like check your phone and be stressed about that. But also giving yourself permission to just be present in that conversation. And a big thing they talk about is also being able to take a break, being able to go on vacation, or like not check your email until 9 o'clock in the morning. Like, put those boundaries down around your time so that you have time to process things that have happened. You have time to think, you have time to spend with your family, or like doing things you enjoy. Something we've developed in, I think, larger work culture, and it definitely permeates politics, is this, like, if you're not literally breaking your back, you're not working. And like, I don't think that has made a better workplace culture. I don't think that makes for a better society. I think there is something to having that discipline and having a work ethic, but I think we're talking about something that goes well beyond a work ethic and can really erode morale. And I think that's something in both politics and policing that we've struggled with.
Yeah.
Is asserting those professional and personal boundaries.
Do you find in the municipal level of politics that you can be yourself? Do you kind of have to fit into certain groups, certain cliques, or anything like that? Or, it's a big council.
Yeah.
You get to just be yourself and speak your mind, say what you believe, and then is it just trying to convince everybody to kind of come in your direction?
That's a tricky question, because I think it can depend on the issue. I think it also depends on the council. Certainly we see examples of people being authentic and speaking their mind and not understanding, because we're now in a much more global context. People take a screen cap of a meeting where maybe you weren't your best self or you weren't super articulate, and it gets blown out of proportion, or the context gets stripped away from it. And that's one of the risks that happens in politics. I think you probably could pull a number of examples from your own day-to-day work on this, as could your listeners. Um, but on the flip side of that, I also think that it's unhelpful to strip too much of the personal away and to be too scripted. And I think that we're in an era where people are looking for authenticity, even at the cost of sometimes political correctness or um, something that's super polished. And I think it behooves, and I think people feel sometimes like they're being, from a political sense, if you're giving a very scripted response or speaking in a really scripted manner, they feel dismissed and unheard and unadvocated for. And so there is something to being unpolished and speaking from the heart.
That's why I try to have certain guests on and I won't have others because I'm like, what purpose is it going to serve
Yeah.
to get somebody in here that, like, if I feel like they're just going to speak on somebody else's behalf or some other group, or they're just trying to pander for something, it's like, well, if you're not going to give me any concrete details, or we're going to have a real conversation, then I'm not even going to waste my time.
Yeah.
So,
and sort of back to the point we were talking about a few minutes ago, is I don't think any of this gets better if we keep trying to hyper mediate our way out of this. I think sometimes you just need to have really tough, sometimes awkward and uncomfortable conversations. And I think that often the discomfort is framed as one-sided. I think
like, the first one to scream victim is the victim and the other person is evil. And it's like, whoa, there's something that precipitated this. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, we could talk about public safety. That's really truly your realm. But oftentimes people have asked me, like, how do you make neighborhoods safer without upping a police budget? And what I fall back on is like that we need, I challenge your listeners, how many of you know your neighbors, right? How many of us know the people who live in our immediate vicinity? You don't have to like them. You don't have to spend holidays with them, but just know who they are and understand a little bit of their personal circumstances. Because I feel like our city has grown a lot. I know a lot of Canada has grown really exponentially. We're a country that's heavy on growth, but we haven't necessarily taken the skills that will help us navigate that growth. And one of it is, if you want your neighborhood to feel neighborly, you have to be a neighbor. You have to go and meet people and know who's there. And at the very least, so that when you see someone walking down the street with a bike, you know that that's your neighbor, or a visitor at your neighbor's house, rather than somebody who's maybe walking off with your neighbor's bike. And I think out of just knowing people because you live in proximity to them, we have to develop that skill back where we can have those tough conversations. I think a lot of us grew up in a context of, you don't really talk, like in polite company, you don't talk religion and politics. And I heard an interesting take, which was that this disarmed us for having tough conversations and for having uncomfortable conversations about something that's really important to a lot of people, and for which a lot of people aren't experts on. We're all novices at it.
Yeah.
Unless you're a theologian or an elected official. But
yeah,
that's not a lot of folks. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. A lot of those conversations, though, I think they need to have the right people in the room too.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be kind of difficult when that's not occurring. But one thing I did want to ask you, like, especially if you're talking about building better communities, safer communities, the pressures on council
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to kind of go through this a little bit with you and just get your perspective on, who exactly is trying, I'll say, influencing council, because you're all individuals, and this comes up with like a bit of the party discussion now, where parties are entering municipal politics. I feel like whether the party's being influenced or an individual's being influenced, there's issues either way.
Mm-hmm.
But from your experience, you have individuals who try to influence things all the way up to the province coming down and trying to influence stuff. So can you walk through a bit of the maybe the day to day, like what you hear, what you see from that side of it?
So I mean, like you, well, we have an inbox, and that is, we get sometimes hundreds, sometimes upwards of, depending on the season, thousands of emails um, a month. Certainly on some issues, we've gotten hundreds and hundreds of emails a day. Some of, I would say that that's extraordinary. That's a coordinated effort. But for the most part, on the day to day, we get emails from our constituents who want to influence our decision or provide decisions or provide feedback. Also, you also get a lot of feedback from industry associations, and some of those might be business, some of those might be social services, or um, groups of citizens who have a common cause like climate change or river valley preservation, and as well as the information from city administration. So it's all kind of feeding in, not just to your inbox, but phone calls and meetings. You'll be grocery shopping and someone will be like, "Hey, good to see you. You should do this." Or they'll send you a text message. How you weight that, I think, is um, that's up to individual counselor. Some people take very seriously the feedback of industry groups, and others do not. They see that as being less authentic, because, and not necessarily how I feel, but some people feel industry groups because they're paying into that. They have a full-time staff member maybe who's working on something, that person is sort of paid to advocate for things, versus other groups or residents who may not be as well equipped. So that's an example of how someone might weight the feedback that they're getting in real time.
Do you find certain people have maybe limited access though? Like if it's an individual versus a business, that business has people working on it 24 hours a day, like they got a position dedicated to it.
Mhm.
So they're kind of getting more listening time with somebody as opposed to just like the one person in the neighborhood.
Yeah, that is a totally valid critique. So if you're going to sort of always side with one stakeholder or one type of stakeholder, you're going to, just as you articulated, you're going to miss the mark. And I'm really not being specific on this, because I could talk about it as developers versus residents in a neighborhood where development is going. I could talk about it as a business association versus individual social services agency. Like uh, these types of conflicts. It really, if anyone out there thinks it's black and white, or it's really straightforward, I think contextually you find that you won't always even agree with yourself. You're always going to find a contextual reason that something is different than something else that you decided on.
Well, I think a lot of people miss the nuance to it,
Yeah.
right? And it speaks to our playing at the extremes. Is a lot of people just it's black or white. You agree or you don't agree. It's like, well, not that I don't agree, but there are other things at play, and I'm talking to 10 different people, and they all have their own motivations, right? So there's just a lot going on.
And so I think part of that is like your judgment as an elected official, your discretion, your experience, because I think at different points in your political career, whether you're newly elected or you're around for a second time, if you've held a different type of office before, that's all going to feed into that. And then, like, your character, the type of leader you want to be. And underpinning this all is that at the municipal level, you don't take an oath to serve just the residents of your ward. You take an oath to serve the city and the best interests of the city. So there's certainly been a number of times in which something is not in the best interests of the residents of your ward, but it is in the best interests of your city. So you got to weight that.
Yeah.
You have to weight that. Yeah. And that's tough. And it's hard to stare down people who elected you and say, I know I'm going to disappoint you, but this is the reason I have to make the decision this way. And it's hard to look people in the eye when that happens.
Yeah, but as long as they give you the grace to, the time to explain that, instead of just going online and blasting you with whatever they want to say, it's like, yeah, okay, you might not agree, but find out the why behind it.
Yeah, and I think we try and explain. I've certainly tried to explain the harder decisions that we've made in my time in office. I think also you kind of have to. I've learned that sometimes people just need an outlet. They need to be angry. They need to vent, and it's not worth my mental health to go and internalize that type of anger, because that's not about me. That's not about the person who I am and the parent I am or the friend I am. That's about the person who's occupying the office, and you kind of have to disconnect your personal self-worth and your personal value a little bit from that for your own sanity.
Well, that's my day every day. Listen to the people call me names or say things about me or family or something. It's like, okay, well, whatever. I couldn't care less, right? Like you just kind of put up a wall to that stuff.
Well, and you probably recognize really quickly it's not about you. It's about what you represent.
Yeah.
And what you represent to those people. It's not pleasant. It doesn't invalidate their experience, but it also doesn't mean that you're a bad person.
Yeah. Just one of the last things I wanted to ask was, what do you want to see council continue doing? And then what are some things that you want to see change? So like what's trending in a good direction with council right now? And what are some things that you think like this has to change, or we haven't changed it yet? Something along those lines.
Mm-hmm. This is not about public safety at all. I think this council recognized that our industrial growth has faltered in the city, and that if we're going to turn the corner on a lot of our financial challenges, which feed into like our economic challenges, which can feed into our social challenges, we have to turn our industrial growth around. And so this council has given administration a really aggressive mandate to pursue industrial growth. I think the next council needs to double down on that. I'd like to see them double down on that and prioritize industrial growth. I know your listeners are like, that's not why I listen to the Quiet Professional podcast to hear about industrial growth. But at the municipal level, like so much is intertwined with our local economy and our economic growth. And I would really hate to see us continue to lose ground on that file. So we had a bit of a wake-up call a couple of years ago, and that we've lost, I'll say like 12% of our industrial base to the surrounding area for a number of reasons. But we need to get that back on track, because industrial growth is, for your listeners out there, it is a very good source of tax revenue that doesn't require a lot of service. Like the industrial growth doesn't require rec centers. It doesn't require a certain amount of fire halls. It generally doesn't require a lot of policing. So industrial growth is really, but it pays a lot in taxes. So it helps us provide those services.
That 100%. And that's what people listen for. I mean, the whole point of these conversations is to kind of find out these behind the scenes decisions, right? Like people wouldn't know. And you're absolutely right. I mean, that touches on public safety. It plays into fires and their budgets and police and our budgets. And, when the new CBA comes up for renewal, can city even afford to support any kind of raise, right? So it definitely is an important piece of this.
Yeah. So that's something I think councils prioritize really well, and I think we should continue. I want to see the next council um, uh, champion that. Something I hope that we see sort of change. There's a few things. I think there's a lot of relationships that need a reset, and I don't want to get into sort of, I would say, over analyzing the past, but I think the relationship with the provincial government needs a reset. I think the relationship with a lot of stakeholders in the community needs a bit of a reset. And I would encourage the next council to enter those conversations with open ears and humility. I think it's really hard. Um, it's really hard. It's a very vulnerable feeling to be in elected office and people look at you and say, like, well, what's the answer? And I think there's a lot of power in saying, I don't have the answer. I don't know what the solution to this is.
Humility.
A humility, being open to hearing potential solutions and how things impact people. As soon as you come with a solution, you've kind of closed yourself off to inputs on that. And I think that puts the city, I think that puts any governor in a really precarious situation. There is a time to be decisive, but I think it would serve the next council really well to go in with really open ears and open to hearing solutions.
You know what? I would 100% agree with you on that. And from what I've seen from some of the meetings and things that I've watched, there was a big lack of that in at least this council. I know there's going to be quite a bit of turnover coming up here, so it'll be interesting to see who gets in and what experience they bring in that sort of thing. The self-awareness to say, yeah, I don't know. And I want to hear all perspectives rather than they hear something and immediately have this answer when it's like, well, that isn't the answer, or we're going down the wrong path, we're continuing down the wrong path. So I think that being open to other ideas and having that humility are things that we're certainly missing in a lot of the discussions. So.
And going back to what I was saying about authenticity, not knowing the answers to that also is an authentic sort of experience. Being open to hearing people's frustrations, sometimes anger, sometimes sadness, sometimes fear, sometimes joy. That makes you a more authentic leader. And I think that's how you govern as a moderate. Is you don't have to be the person that makes people fearful, but that doesn't mean you can't hear that they're afraid.
One of the things I brought up in another one of the discussions was just, I feel like this would be important. I always say I don't know what your schedule entails day to day, but I think it would almost be critically important for any city councilor to make sure they go out and experience a lot of these things. So do the ride along with police and fire. But if you got a water treatment facility in your area, go and see what those people do for a shift. And on the more, I'll say the more critical ones, or the things that come up in the media more so. So again, back to law enforcement, maybe do it once a year. Like it's not just one and done. And 4 years, I'm an expert on this topic. It's like you need to be integrated into like what is going on in that world of things. Because when I go speak to my constituents, I can say, hey, I have multiple conversations. I've seen what they're doing day to day. I know what they're doing. So that was one thing I wanted to kind of reiterate, even as the points we're talking about here, as a change. I think that would serve people really well. And it's not just for Edmonton. This is stuff for every city, because every city, all these big cities seems like very similar problems.
I agree. Certainly it's easier at the beginning of your term or your tenure as a counselor to do that. But like something we did really early on, I had a staff member who was my EA at the time was booking me in things all the time. And I had that experience. I did as a police commissioner for 6 years. Pandemic was in the middle of that, so they suspended a lot of ride-alongs, but I got to do 3 ride-alongs. And different units. I did once I went out with the duty officer.
Yeah.
Once I did the fly-along, which was interesting in its own way. And then I also did the help team ride-along. And I loved all of them, but the help team one was really interesting. Mostly because when you're doing a fly along, you understand what's happening in a different way. And when you're riding with a duty officer, you're not the first responder on site; you're second or even third. But with help team, you're proactive, and you're finding people and you're approaching people, and that was really different as well. So I really value those experiences.
Oh, very good.
I also did a ride along in Las Vegas as well. Which was they sent us out at 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning, and let me tell you, there's no quieter shift in the world than a 7 a.m. Las Vegas shift.
Yeah, you know what? That's actually good because you go out and you see what other people are doing, and because again, we don't have all the answers here. As much as we like to think we do, and I'm talking on the law enforcement side, it is good to go out and experience what other people experience. So just as we come up to the end of the time, what is next for you after council? Bigger, better plans, or taking a break from everything?
Well, I think there's a little bit of noise here. I think that, I don't have anything queued up formally, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm committed to the City of Edmonton. It's my hometown and I love it. I think I'm starting next week. I'm going to launch about a 5-post series on my website /Substack that is going to talk about sort of the things I think the next council really needs to focus on. And I think it'll touch on some of the themes we talked about. But I'm also, my son is 4 now. He was born right before the last election, and he's going to go into kindergarten soon. So I'm also looking forward to spending a little bit more time with him, and trying to make this year special for him.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Last thing, where can people find you? There, obviously, you've mentioned the website, Substack, any social media that people can follow you at?
Further to the conversation we've had, my website, sarahhamilton.ca, will continue to be live, and we'll probably connect over to my Substack in the next few weeks. And I have Instagram, sarahhamilton_yake. And I'm also, I think, going to keep X alive, but not. It's not going to be super active. So I think you'll find me in the future on Instagram and Substack.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. I want to say thanks for being on the show today. It was great getting some insight. So
thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Nathan.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening in and following along with the discussions. Be sure to click the follow or subscribe button on your respective listening platform. Also, check out the Quiet Professional on X and Instagram under TQP780. And most importantly, please share where you can. Everyone has a part to play in getting these education and information pieces out there, so pass it along. Thanks again.